Welcome to a spark of awareness. We live in a time where we are constantly being stimulated, prompted by systems, by algorithms, by AI. But when we outsource our answers, we slowly give away our authority, our inner voice, our self-mastery. Conscious leadership has no shortcut, no hack, and it can only begin from within. It is the courage to stop escaping and to sit with what's alive and present inside, even when it's very uncomfortable. But that's where growth is. And this podcast is a space for that. This podcast is an evolution. And every week, I will share a 15-minute human prompt, live, non-performative. It is a moment of reflection drawn from my work in conscious leadership, from the journeys of the leaders I coach and accompany, and from what is moving in a collective film of what is humanity and leadership. I am Sophie, a conscious leadership coach and guide of transformation. I support leaders who are crossing the threshold right now from the old system of leadership, a legacy, into a deeper, more conscious way of being. If the traditional model no longer resonates, know that you are not alone, and that is your weekly practice. This is your time with your inner world. This is your weekly spark of awareness. Welcome. So, welcome to this weekly episode of A Spark of Awareness. I'm freshly back from PGC London. It was a lovely conference, good catch up with partners, friends, I can say as well now, and events with a lot of intention, organizing some circles of women executives. So that was a lot of fun. So freshly back with some reflection for this third episode covering the third self-sabotage pattern of leaders, which is fear-based leadership. So something very common I've seen in almost 100% all the leaders I've worked with. In one form or another, there's fear in the background that is running the show and influencing the decisions of leaders. And when it has really serious consequences, it's when it's decision about investments, who to take the money from, planning the growth of a company, who to hire, who to fire, how you treat people. And so when the fear is high and it's not conscious, you see many leaders out there who mistake intuition, instinct, conviction for fears. And they don't know that it's fear driving them. So when those decisions are made out of fear, they are made out of ego. When there's fear running the decision, it's about preserving the self, surviving, rather than creating, rather than leading from a place of integrity. And that's why we see so many people who are not at the leadership level, burnt out, traumatized by the way they are treated in organization, because those systems are run so much with fear. I've seen this at all the layers, and I know this because in private rooms, talking to founders, that fear is very real. And they are most of the time not conscious about it. So I'm bringing awareness to that pattern, that self-sabotage, because that's one you can be sure it's present. So how can you recognize yourself if you are making decision out of fear? So first of all, there's an energy of rush, like that urgency. I need to react, I need to act, I need to fix, I need to solve this now. And if you think of the thought of waiting just for an hour or a day to fix that matter, and it makes you very uncomfortable and you want to react, you want to control it, this is fear. So fear is a contraction, and usually it leads you to control, and it leads you to react and overreact. Another symptom of fear I see, which is not in the reaction, it's also in the inaction. When fear is present, there's what I call the paralysis analysis. It's the fear of making the wrong decision, making the wrong move. And so no decisions are made until the leader is forced to make a decision. Can you recognize yourself there? And if we go back really to the origin of fear, what it is really in the body, it's a nervous system reaction of fight, or flight, or freeze. And evolutionary, it is the exact same reaction in the body that when we actually had to feel this emotion to survive, to not die. If you are in a jungle, chased by a predator, fear is helping you run away and not stay in front of a predator and die, right? So fear is very evolutionary to help us save ourselves, not die, avoid danger. But we live in a modern world where there's no predators chasing us. We're not going to fall in a trap and die. And so all those fears are over-dominating our psyche, our mental. And most of the fears are mental. I call it good and bad fears. The good fears, they are the fears that can really endanger you. Should you cross that street with many cars and risk to die? Should you jump from that cliff where you don't know where you're going to land? It's a good fear. Should you eat that could be poisonous? So all those fears are good fears. But there's 80% of the rest of the fears that are so mental, they are what I call the bad fears because they are not real. If I make that decision, will people like me? If I say this, will people still like me? If I'm myself, will I lose people? If I make a hard decision, but I know it's the right thing, will I be isolated, excluded, and I don't know, die in the street and have no money? I heard that kind of story, and it's such a big story for such a small event. So that's where it's disproportional, the fears when they are mental and they are not real. Can you recognize yourself there when your fear is very imaginary and they are influencing your decisions? I want to share here a personal anecdote from myself and another founder I work with on how that fear has played and how, in this case, we responded to it. I remember one of the studios I was building a few years ago. I put so much energy to build that studio. It took 3 years. I built a dream team. We built a game within 9 months. And then that game started to show very good KPI, an LTV of $10. We were on a healthy curve of growth. But the company has changed the objectives to have a return much faster. And suddenly the game we were building and the team I was building didn't meet the strategy anymore. That changed along the journey. That's okay. But that's the responsibility on the leadership. And I remember I had a call one night by my boss who told me, look, we crunch our numbers and we have to cut cost and your studio is affected. And kind of putting a bit of the blame on the studio, although, like I said, when a company is changing strategy without taking responsibility for the teams, it's much easier to put the blame on teams, and asking me to fire half of my team in the next days and tell them to leave. And I remember that night, I sat with a decision. Of course, there were many fears running through me. There was the fear like, what if I disobey? What if I don't agree with that? What if I leave? What if I do it? And I was running all the scenarios in my head. But I made a very conscious choice that night. I will not decide from fears. I will decide from my integrity value. Because if I decide from fear, very likely in the next month, when I will look back in that moment where I made decision out of fears instead of my integrity, I will probably not like very much the person I'm looking into the mirror at. So I decided to follow my integrity, and I put myself on the list, and I left with the leads, and then a good portion of the studio was preserved. But I decided for myself, this is not the kind of environment and leadership I want to work with. And I can tell you, I don't regret at all that decision 5 years after. I know who I am, I'm good in my shoes, and I don't have to regret and build even more fears along the way of my leadership because I followed my integrity. And the other anecdote of a leader I work with, his studio and game has LGBTQ plus content, and he got a note one day from one of the platforms where he distributes his game that the game was banned in Russia because of the content. And this is a moment of crossroad of decision where you can, out of fear, say, okay, fine, I will remove the content from Russia and just throw my integrity in the trash bin and then forget all my values, why I created this studio, those games in the first place, and this artist I work with. Or I stand by my values and my integrity and I push back. And that founder, he did push back. And of course, he didn't change the course, but it created a conversation for other studios, the platform itself, to rethink about how the censorship, the content is banned in different places, and how games, as a form of art, are connected with politics. So all of that to say, we are at a time where leadership is calling for integrity. And the more we see leaders leading from fears, the more it's destroying value of a company, it's destroying value of teams and people. And I don't see those kind of companies doing well, living so long in the future, especially for the new ones. So this is really important that you keep in check your fears. This is part of the responsibility of a role. So how do we do that? So fear, again, it's a body response, it's a body feeling, it's an emotion, it's a signal to show you that there's something you don't know that needs to be known. Remember, the fears are mental, they are not real. So we are afraid more of the outcome that can happen rather than the reality. So a good exercise, which is the reference I'm still using today from Tim Ferriss, a fear setting exercise where you draw on different columns about the fear, you list all your fears, you write them all down. And in the second column, you list for each fear, how will you repair the event if that happens. So you already accept that the thing that you fear the most is going to happen. How will you repair and mitigate it? So that helps you put yourself in your body and in the state already of accepting that it might happen. And you will see you feel already more relaxed to just put on paper your fears. And on the third column, you will list for each fear, how can you reduce the odds of this event to happen? How can you prevent it? You can't prevent it fully, you can't control that. But what can you do today to minimize the impact, the consequence of that event that you fear the most? So you prepare yourself. So fear is an amazing compass to signal something that needs preparation, that you need to do. Bring the unknown to the known. And another book I would like to recommend is It Didn't Start With You from Mark Wolin. My point here is a lot of our fears are transgenerational. They didn't start with us. Maybe it's a fear you formed when you were a child, something traumatized you, and then it runs in the background of small events of your life today. So understanding what's the origin of your fears. If you have fear with money or fear of being disliked, very likely it's not from today, it's from before, where maybe it was putting yourself in danger to express your truth or to spend money because you missed money when you were a kid, or in your family history. So understanding the origins can help to put back in perspective that those fears are not real and they are disproportionate to the reality today. So that's it for the episode today focusing on fears. There's so much more to share that I will share in future episodes. But as usual, to close this episode of reflection, I would like to invite you to close your eyes and to receive everything that I have just shared and connect back to your body. Do you feel fear in your body right now? Can you locate where the fear is? As you connect with your body, where is the tension? Where is the contraction when you think of events that you're afraid of happening? Usually, they are in the guts, they are in the belly. It's an ache in the stomach. When you feel that, you can bring awareness that there's fear. And there's nothing to fix or to correct, just to feel and just to understand that there's fear and where is it coming from and how do you want to respond to it. I'm inviting you to slow down your breathing and relax and sit with your fears. And as you continue the breathing and the meditation after this episode, which I really recommend to sit down and write out what emerges, bring awareness to your fears, feel them, and understand where they're coming from. You, as a leader, your responsibility is to act with awareness and responsibility. That's the role you accepted, that's the role you need to take. So let's close this reflection with a last deep breath together, inhaling, deep inhaling through the nose. And deep exhale through the mouth. Thank you for tuning in this episode. I'll see you next week for the 4th self-sabotage pattern. Thank you for tuning in into this weekly reflection, the weekly spark of awareness. After this episode, I invite you to take a few moments with yourself, even just 15 minutes, to sit with what resonated, to breathe, and to notice what is shifting inside. This is a practice, a discipline of presence, truth, and self-connection. If this work speaks to you, I accompany leaders in one-on-one journeys and group experiences of transformation, supporting them as they cross the threshold into a truer and freer way of leading and living. If you feel called to explore this path, I would love to hear your story, and let's connect. Sending you love and courage, and have a great week ahead. This is my spark of awareness.